Hey guys, Tim Ballintine here, Coa Sports coach. Did a race just yesterday and I thought I'd walk you through some of the lessons that I learnt that potentially I can pass on to you as the coach. So this is the 3R Classic Sprint Race. It's one lap of London with a steady lead in of about 6 kilometres and a 5 kilometre race in itself. Always a fast start. So you'll see here, certainly I've nominated for A grade, and that's where I do all my Zwift racing. And look, it's always a hard and fast start, and just a matter of really hanging on and getting through this first, if you want to call it, 60 to 90 seconds. That's something that's really changed. I've been on Zwift now for many years, 5-6 years actually, and certainly when they brought the events out, it wasn't such a hard and fast start. So it's just one of the unique things with Zwift racing that for some reason there's this culture of wanting to absolutely go like a bull at the gate in the first kilometre and inflict pain on each other. So look, I don't mind it, but yeah, it's a really interesting part of Zwift racing. So you can see here, things are already starting to settle down after that hard start, albeit the group will come together on the right-hand side. Obviously, you can see there that there's a front group forming of about 5 or 6 riders. It's probably settling down a little bit too much for my liking at this point in such a short race, and I like to sort of keep the pressure on at stages, and knowing obviously with this course, you know, there is essentially a 5% kick or elevation coming up, and I like this to as a time to sort of put some pressure on the group again, just to make sure, yep, you can see here, so as we come up that rise, just to put a little bit more pressure on the guys that they're not getting too comfortable, and certainly making sure that they feel like they're in a race. I'm off the front probably a little bit too much as well, so not getting any draft effect. The riders behind clearly I'm starting to flick my elbow, so using the Zwift companion app, you can flick an elbow, you can raise a hand to say thank you, which you did just then. So I flicked my elbow to try and work together as a group, just to try and establish this front group essentially in the race itself, and really open up a big gap. And we have done that at this point. It's this group and then 25 seconds to the next group. So you can clearly see here that there's a divide in the 14 starters of the race. And this will happen most of the time in most Zwift races, and that's the whole point of categories, obviously. We do have a B grade nominated rider, so they've managed to push through. Of course, you can pick whatever category you like. Potentially that person is about to make the jump to A grade. It's of course it's up to them, and it can also depend on where you're at in your training cycle. So this part of London is rolling flats, you know, 1-2% gradients. Again, coming to the front again, sitting on about 260 watts, which is really comfortable for me as a cyclist, and it's all relative, of course, to your FTP and where you're at as a cyclist. An element of almost fighting for the back at stages coming through here. We do come up to, you know, not a tough climb, but a short, sharp pinching climb, and generally sort of within 500 meters or a kilometer of that climb, you'll see almost the power drop right away, as people try to get almost ready. Not so much psych yourself, but just freshen those legs up just a little bit. And I've just sprung away here again. That's just the nature of the game. Sometimes it just gets away from you, but certainly not making any sort of attack. You know, still staying within that sort of 3 to 4 watts per kilo in what is a short race. So again here, I gave a little elbow flick to maybe, I have been off the front here for over a minute, so it would be nice to get some help, but again, that's probably on me. I probably should just not be so eager to get going, and you can see there my power dropped right away to the low 200s as soon as those guys come through. So just like in racing on the road or riding on the road, when you sit at the back of a pack, you're doing far less work than the rider on the front. Preparing here for the climb, I typically like to be either at the front or certainly top 3 riders coming into any sort of attack, whether it's, in Innsbruck with the leg snapper or this part of the London course here as we take a right-hander. I just don't like to dictate off the front rather than be, that's just my style. So here we'll see some really big numbers coming now. Here, a lot of orange numbers on the right-hand side in watts per kilo. Gives me a bit of a look also for potentially at the finish there who might be there, yeah, see what they've got. So pushing over, holding 500 watts, 550, 600 at times. As we get to the top of this climb, trying to close that gap to that front rider. Even a couple of riders there falling off the back, but not enough to fall off the back of the group, that's for sure, as we come across the top. That's a really key part. Probably a key part of the lead-in. We haven't even actually started the race, so to speak, yet. But of course, if you're not with the front group in the lead-in, you're not going to be there at the start of the race, so to speak. So essentially, the race will start. Now, I jumped ahead here in the coverage because there's a bit of dead time there. So we're 700 meters from the start of the official race here. This is a really key moment and a moment where I probably made an error. You can see we split into 2 groups of 2 here, and just watch the rider on the left in the green makes a really good move here at the start of the race, and something that I needed to be more aware of as in this race. So, and even a bit of an orange flash, so he's away, and I just hesitated for just 2 seconds, and that created a gap there where simply I had to work really hard to try and close that. You can see the rider beside me there trying to close it too. We left it too long. You should be far more responsive than that. So you need to be really switched on, particularly in a sprint race as well. There's really no excuses. And then it's a matter of us two now working together to try and close to the front there, who's already opened a 2-second gap, which is too big. So I'm now going to work really hard to try and work towards first, which I'm unable to do. I'm unable to close that 2-second gap there. They're riding really solidly at around 6 watts per kilo, just like me, and I'm really struggling. So, that's an indication of obviously where I'm at as well, just not being good enough. But also, I feel that if I had responded faster on that attack off the start line and been on his wheel, I certainly could have stayed with. And here comes Olsen here on the side here. Trying to, at some point, Osland to get to the front, because there's 2. If we can somehow coordinate and get together, we can potentially bridge that gap. But it's now looking in my head and in the race itself, that's going to be really difficult to close in Zwift. And obviously in the real world, I think I'd give a flick of the elbow here as well to try and get old mate to come to the front and maybe work together for one last time. So again, just sitting off the front here, just dangling out in the breeze, and the other gentleman is now just pulled away. So it really just becomes a race for second place, unless all I'm hoping is that the guy in first has just pushed that hard, not knowing him, that then he'll come back to us. But he basically maintains that lead right to the end of the line. So if you just treat this as the front of the race, which it isn't, I know, but there's a lot of ducks and drakes that go on here between now and the finish, because you can see that it's us two and then a gap back of 29 seconds. So the person there in 4th position is not going to bridge that 29-second gap, and they're on their own as well. So it genuinely is just me versus Olsen at this point, and I just stopped pedaling then. So I've stopped pedaling because I've been on the front there for so long. So it's a little bit like, well, if you're just going to hang me out there, I'm just going to stop and you can go to the front for a bit. So it's just the tactics and the strategy of the racing that I need a bit of rest, because I've been working on the front there for a good 2 minutes, well and truly up and around and over my threshold. I need a bit of a breather. So just some elements of Zwift you can see on screen as we're moving through here. So again, it's a one lap, so lap 1 of 1, and it's got the blue bar that moves across the bottom there, which gives you an indication of how far you are through the lap itself or the race itself. So we're sort of halfway through the race, albeit we've been going there for over 11.5 minutes. Of course, that includes that 6 kilometre lead in to the start line. A speed there, 38 kilometers per hour. Of course, that's game based, but that's based on watts per kilo and the height and weight of your avatar. A controversial topic that perhaps we'll cover for another day. Sensing another gap there, just applying some pressure, attacking here, just making sure that, and just testing out what sort of legs they've got. Now, he does respond really well there. To come back to me, you can see that orange number on the right hand side, so he is trying to stay with me, which certainly says that he's not on a training ride. He's definitely here to race. Of course, I'm learning too, still learning. Every Zwift race that I do, you become better and better at it. I don't have a power up at the moment. You'll see like a little grey halo circle beside my power number. That usually is filled with a picture, which is a power up, which can come in handy at the end of a race, obviously. And my power up was just a small points bonus. It's a randomly selected power up that flicks through as you go through comms or laps. And unfortunately, I didn't pick up an aero helmet or a draft bust or a feather power up or anything like that. So I am genuinely just on my own, going to push to the line. Too much time off the front for me, for my liking, but I just couldn't get him to come. He's just really tactically quite a smart Zwift racer, but also potentially in the back of my mind, well, maybe he just can't as well. So I always like to sit on the positive side and think that maybe I've got one over him. So we come around this corner here. Just the bike that I ride on Zwift in game, I sacrifice some handling for some aerodynamics, and whenever I come out of corners on this bike, I typically lose a little bit of speed or a little bit of time to the person sitting behind me, and you'll probably potentially notice that here, maybe. Yeah, not so much on this corner. So starting to really shape up here for a finish. So we're around a kilometre, you'll see 1.1 kilometre to the finish. A really hard effort. So what I want to demonstrate here is not to show off to say how hard I work, but just to give an indication here of what I actually look like here in the real world, so to speak. I did capture some footage here of the sprint finish, which I won't talk over. I'll just let you watch, but it's painful, but it's something that I would typically probably struggle to do on my own if I was just given a 60-second effort. And being quite a competitive person, and a lot of athletes I coach are very competitive as well, I find that just putting myself against someone else, I'll just push that little bit harder. So I'll leave that now. Hopefully you've taken a little bit away and enjoy the pain on my face. Ciao.